Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Murphy. I have the honor of being the junior senator from the state of Connecticut. I am here today with my good friend, Senator Dick Durbin, as well as Maggie Thompson from the organization Higher Ed Not Debt, housed at the Center of American Progress, but a coalition group of many organizations that care about supporting students, to announce the introduction of a new piece of legislation, the Students Before Profits Act. We have been watching a catastrophe unfold for students all across this country for a number of years now. For-profit colleges, which used to occupy a very small share of the higher education market, have grown in such size and such scope to really pose a threat to the way in which we provide education to kids across this country. Still today, only about 12% of all students are enrolled in for-profit colleges, but 50% of the loan defaults in this country come from that 12% of students. It tells you that students are getting a bad bargain from for-profit colleges all across this country. And what has happened is, to me, unconscionable. Students have become a commodity. Students have become a source of immense profit for these for-profit colleges. And it comes at a cost to the students' education and their pocketbooks. Some of the statistics are really sort of hard to get your head wrapped around. These colleges are spending more money on marketing themselves than they are on actually providing the education. Right? Think about that. A college, the average for-profit college is spending more money marketing itself to students than it is actually providing coursework to these students. These colleges are spending more money on paying CEO salaries and turning returns back to their investors than they are in educating their students. Congress can't allow that to happen because these colleges are playing with taxpayer dollars. Most of these schools, 90% of their revenue comes from the federal government, from Pell Grants and Stafford loans. And so it's time that we tell these colleges that they've got to have some scratch in the game. It's time that we tell these CEOs and these investors that they will have something to lose if they are caught defrauding students. And that's what this piece of legislation will do. It will make these schools, their companies' directors and owners personally liable if they are caught defrauding students, as Corinthian College was. The legislation will include enhanced civil penalties against institutions and their executive officers when they lie to students about their employment prospects, their default rates, their costs, their admissions requirements, or completion rates. And it will stop repeat offenders from being caught defrauding students and then just simply setting up shop under a different college brand name. Individuals who have been caught defrauding students won't be able to just go and establish a new university under a new name. It's time that the individuals and the organizations who are out there defrauding students pay a cost. And I think if this legislation is adopted by itself or as part of the Higher Education Act, it'll send a strong message to for-profit colleges that they need to clean up their act. There's nothing like being personally liable if you are someone who's running or investing in one of these schools. We think that this is the right kind of message to send. And there's no doubt that we need this. Corinthian College was, and Senator Durbin has been the leader on taking on Corinthian College. Corinthian College was providing degrees to hundreds of thousands of students. And it wasn't until the Department of Education pulled their Title IV funding that their investors were forced to close up shop. It didn't matter that they were defrauding students, giving out worthless degrees. Ultimately, it was the Department of Education that stepped in But our current oversight system is broken. The Department of Education should be stepping in to a lot more situations than just Corinthian. Even in Corinthian's case, its own accreditor still stands by the fact that they were continuing to accredit Corinthian even as the Department of Education was pulling its Title IV funding. So we have a much broader conversation to be had about how to keep about how to properly account for taxpayer dollars. But the Students Before Profits Act, I think, will send a very strong message to these companies that there will be real consequences if they continue to defraud students. So with that, let me introduce the real leader on this issue, somebody who has been shining a light on the abuses of for-profit colleges long before I got involved in this issue, Senator Dick Durbin.
Thanks. I want to thank Senator Murphy and Maggie Thompson for joining us this morning to talk about this issue. And as Senator Murphy mentioned, 10 to 12% of the high school graduates end up in these schools. 20% of the federal aid to education goes to for-profit colleges and universities. 44% plus of the student loan defaults are the students at these for-profit colleges and universities. What's going on here? Why do we have 10% of the students, 12% of the students, and 44% of the student loan defaults associated with these institutions? Well, quite honestly, it's because these students don't know what they're getting into. Many of them are not ready for college. But as far as the for-profits are concerned, if they can sign on the bottom line, they can qualify for a $5,700 Pell Grant straight to the for-profit school and sign up for college loans. So what the students find when they get into most of these for-profit colleges and universities is that they face the prospect of debt, dropout, default, and dead-end jobs. The Brookings Institution just did a survey on this, and they talked about how much students earn once they finish their college. You won't be surprised to know that the students who finish the for-profit schools have some of the lowest earnings. They don't get their money's worth when it's all over. So who loses? Students have wasted their time. They've incurred debt, which is not dischargeable in bankruptcy, debt they will carry for a lifetime, and maybe their parents with them. And what do they end up with when it's all over? Sometimes these schools crater and go bankrupt. Corinthian's the most notorious example. Well, when a for-profit school goes bankrupt and out of business, what happens next? The students currently at the school make a decision. Do we keep the hours we've earned at Corinthian and the debt, or do we give up hours and years of education there and have our debt forgiven and start over? It's a tough choice for a young person to make. But there's also another result. When the students default and don't pay back their loans, and that's 44% of those from for-profit colleges and universities, 44% of those defaulting are from those schools, the taxpayers lose. And the next generation of students has less money coming back to the Treasury to take care of the needs for them to go to real colleges. Senator Murphy has put his finger on one of the key elements here. We've got to hold those responsible for these education schemes personally responsible. How are they doing, incidentally? Well, at University of Phoenix, the largest in the country, their CEO makes about $9 million a year. 9 million, not bad, huh? And the CEO, and that was in 2013, and the CEO from Corinthian, the school that went bankrupt, $3 million a year. ITT is one I watch closely because it has campuses all over Illinois. They just were announced they were subject to a Department of Justice investigation last week to add on to the multiple investigations going on by the states. Their CEO takes home $3 million, and as Senator Murphy said, most of that is federal money that's just going straight to these CEOs. If you believe in transparency, you believe in accountability, then the Murphy bill is a bill that you should support. These people who are running these schools need to be held accountable. And once they are personally accountable, perhaps some of this exploitation will come to an end. I hope we have the higher education bill this year or soon. I hope that Senator Alexander brings it to the floor. And I hope we have a lot of amendments when it comes to these for-profit schools. These students, their families, America, and its taxpayers deserve better. Maggie Thompson.
Hi, my name is Maggie Thompson. I'm the campaign manager for Higher Ed Not Debt. We're a multi-year, multi-organization campaign housed out of Generation Progress, and we're dedicated to tackling the student debt crisis. Thank you so much to Senators Murphy and Durbin for their leadership on this issue. It's an honor to be here today. Our organization and our partners first began working on the issue of for-profit colleges when we realized that many of the students that we were hearing from who were struggling with their student debt had attended for-profit schools. Through the collapse of Corinthian colleges, we realized how important it was for these schools to be held accountable to the students that they deceived. Almost half, as the senator said, of all the defaults on student loans in this country come from students who attended a for-profit institution. It's impossible to have an honest conversation about how to address the student debt crisis without addressing the huge role that these schools play in the debt crisis. The Students Before Profit Act provides crucial oversight to ensure that students that were deceived by a predatory institution can be made whole again, and that the executives who profited off of these students are held accountable. It's simple. No student should ever be forced into or kept in poverty by the college that they attended. Our campaign has currently heard from almost 9,000 students through our site sellingoutstudents.org. These students all signed a petition asking for a refund from their schools and shared their stories with us. I'm honored to be here today to convey some of their stories. The students we hear from are often financially stressed and unable to find jobs in the career field they pursued at for-profit institutions. Let me walk you through some of the things that we hear from students from these institutions. Unfortunately, none of these students were able to be here today, but we also have the contact information for several of them that we'll be able to talk to with my coworker Charlotte. Several of these students were misled about what their job prospects would be upon graduation. Paul was a student and a veteran who attended Wyotech, a Corinthian school in Pennsylvania. He studied to be an auto tech, never received any of the promised job placement help from the school he was promised, but finally, on his own initiative, was able to land a job. This after hearing from several employers that they just did not respect the degree that he had earned from Wyotech. Paul is lucky. His employer told him that Wyotech didn't provide him the training he needed for the job, but is helping him to go back to trade school to get the skills he needs. Several other students were also lied to about their eligibility to qualify for certain jobs. One woman at Virginia College in Alabama, for example, was promised she could become a nurse despite telling the school that she had a felony conviction that was several decades old. She spent 3 years at the school, working hard. She now has tens of thousands of dollars in debt and cannot be employed as a nurse due to the felony the school promised her would never be relevant. Students at these schools also often struggle with the quality of their programs. Peyton from Daphne told us that his professors were often confused about what they were teaching, and in one class the professor had never used the software they were supposed to be teaching. Peyton was attending an IT program at ITT Tech. Peyton told us he was embarrassed that he was taken in by the promises of ITT Tech, but that when they recruited him he was, quote, so excited because I never thought I was the type of person who would ever be able to attend college. These schools are preying on the aspirations of students like Peyton. These students will never get back the time they spent at these predatory institutions, but at the very least, with efforts like the Students Before Profits bill, they can be made financially whole and able to pursue their dreams. It's past time for Washington to act on behalf of these students to rein in the abuses of these institutions. Thank you again to Senators Durbin and Murphy for leading the way to help these students and hold these schools and executives accountable.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Let me just make one thing clear that I might not have. This legislation sets up a student relief fund, and the money from the civil penalties and any money gleaned from individuals because of fraud would go into a student relief fund to help discharge their debts. So this is not only a bill that ultimately will protect students by removing some of the incentives for fraudulent conduct, but it also protect taxpayers because, as Dick mentioned, right now, U.S. taxpayers are on the hook to try to relieve the debt of students who went to Corinthian. This would create a fund so that the wrongdoers are responsible for picking up the tab rather than the taxpayers.